Hey Reddit. Long-time lurker, first-time poster here. I'm writing this because I don't know how to process what just happened. It feels like my life flipped upside down in a matter of hours. So, here's the story. Yesterday, I wrapped up a major business deal, one that's been in the works for months. Everything went perfectly, and I managed to close it a day ahead of schedule. I was excited, not just because of the deal, but because it meant I could surprise my wife, Camila, by coming home early. After 20 years of marriage, I still love doing little things like that for her. I caught the red-eye flight, landed late, and drove straight home. It was around midnight when I pulled into our driveway. That's when I noticed something odd, a shiny gold Mercedes parked there. We don't own a Mercedes, and I didn't recognize this one. My first thought was maybe Camila had a friend over or someone staying the night. But at that hour, it didn't sit right. I grabbed my suitcase, trying to shake off the unease, and quietly let myself in. The house was dark and silent except for the faint sound of the TV in the living room. I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I wanted the surprise to be perfect. As I climbed the stairs, I noticed something else, a man's shoes at the base of the staircase. Not mine. Not anyone I could place. My heart started pounding, but I still tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone got stranded, and Camila offered them a place to crash. It was a ridiculous thought, but it kept me moving forward. When I reached our bedroom door, it was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly and froze. Camila was in bed with another man. I can't even describe what that moment felt like. It was like the ground disappeared from under me, and I was falling into some dark void. My entire body went cold. I stood there, unable to move or speak, just staring at the scene in front of me. They didn't notice me right away. The guy was lying there like he belonged, and Camila, she was laughing at something he said. Laughing. I'd always loved her laugh. Now it felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. That's where I'll stop for now. There's so much more to this story, but I just needed to get this part off my chest. I'll update soon. For now, I'm just trying to breathe. I stood there longer than I should have, just watching. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. Camila, the woman I've loved for more than half my life, was lying next to some guy like it was the most natural thing in the world. They were completely at ease, laughing softly, sharing whispers. It was like I wasn't even part of the picture. I don't know what snapped me out of it. Maybe it was the way she brushed his arm, the same way she used to do with me when we were newlyweds. Or maybe it was just pure survival instinct kicking in, telling me to do something before I broke down entirely. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. My heart was racing, but my movements were mechanical. I pulled my phone out and took a couple of photos from the hallway, not because I wanted to keep them, but because I felt like I'd need proof. Proof of this nightmare that had suddenly become my reality. Afterward, I crept down the stairs. My thoughts were scattered, bouncing between shock, anger, and confusion. There was no plan in my head, just the overwhelming need to get out of there without breaking down. That's when I saw the man's clothes. A suit jacket draped over the living room couch, his tie tossed carelessly on the coffee table, and his car keys sitting next to an empty wine glass. My hands were shaking as I grabbed his things, everything except the keys, and dumped them into a garbage bag I found under the kitchen sink. Then I grabbed the keys and stepped outside. The gold Mercedes gleamed under the porch light. I unlocked it, got in, and started the engine. It felt surreal, sitting behind the wheel of this stranger's car in my own driveway. For a moment, I hesitated. What was I even doing? Was this some ridiculous act of revenge? Did I really want to drive off in this guy's car? But then I thought about Camila, how she was upstairs, laughing with him like I never existed. I backed out of the driveway and drove away, not looking back. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there. The house, the bed, her laughter, it all felt like a cruel joke. So I just drove. The roads were nearly empty that late at night. It was just me, the hum of the engine, and the sound of my thoughts tearing themselves apart. My grip on the steering wheel was so tight my knuckles turned white. I couldn't stop replaying what I'd seen. Her face. The way she looked at him. The way she laughed. It felt like someone was dragging shards of glass across my chest. I had no destination in mind. I just kept driving, taking random turns until I found myself at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the parking lot. I pulled in and parked the Mercedes at the far end, as if putting some distance between me and the house would also put distance between me and the betrayal. I sat in the car for a while, staring blankly at the dashboard. A part of me thought about calling her, but what would I even say? "Hi honey, just wondering why there's a stranger in my bed." The thought made my stomach twist. I didn't want to hear her voice, not right now. Eventually, I got out and walked into the diner. The place was almost empty, just a trucker nursing a cup of coffee and an older waitress who looked like she'd been working the graveyard shift for decades. I slid into a booth near the window, where I could keep an eye on the car. The waitress came over, her notepad in hand. "What can I get you, hon?" she asked, her voice warm but tired. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, I just pointed at the coffee pot in her hand. She gave me a small, knowing smile and poured me a cup. "Rough night?" she asked softly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As she walked away, I stared at the steam rising from the cup. My hands trembled as I lifted it to my lips. The bitter taste was grounding, a small anchor in the chaos. I pulled my phone out and stared at the photos I'd taken. They were blurry but clear enough. I hated that I had them. I hated that I felt like I needed them. I hated everything about this moment. That's when the rage started bubbling up. It wasn't the fiery, screaming kind of anger, it was cold, calculating. I thought about Camila's face when she realized her lover's car was gone. Would she panic? Would she call him first, or would she try to explain herself to me? Did she even care that I'd seen them? I didn't know. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. All I knew was that my life, my marriage, everything I thought was solid and unshakable, had just crumbled in an instant. And now, sitting there in that diner, I realized there was no going back. I don't know how long I sat there, staring out the diner window at the gold Mercedes. The coffee in front of me went cold, but I didn't touch it again. I kept waiting for something to make sense, for my head to clear enough to figure out what to do next. And then my phone buzzed. I flinched, almost spilling the coffee. When I saw Camila's name light up the screen, my stomach twisted. It wasn't a text, it was a call. For a moment, I just stared at it, the name glowing like a mockery of the life we'd built. My thumb hovered over the screen, caught between swiping to answer and letting it ring out. I answered. "Max." Her voice sounded groggy, like she'd just woken up. Or maybe she was faking it. "Where are you?" I woke up, and you're not here. I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, humorless sound that felt foreign coming out of me. "That's funny, Camila. I was going to ask you the same thing. Where are you?" "Oh wait. I know exactly where you are. And who you're with." The silence on the other end was deafening. For a second, I thought she'd hung up. Then she spoke, her voice shaky. "Max, I don't know what you're talking about. Are you okay? Did something happen?" There it was, the first lie. I could hear it in her voice, that slight edge of defensiveness she always had when she was hiding something. It was like she thought she could talk her way out of this. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't play dumb with me, Camila. I saw you. I was home tonight. I saw you with him." Her breath hitched. "Max, it's not what you think." "Don't you dare," I cut her off. "Don't insult me by trying to spin this. I saw everything, Camila. Everything. So, just tell me the truth for once in your life." She stammered for a moment, and then, as if on cue, the tears started. "Max, please, I can explain. Just come home, and we'll talk. Please. Don't do anything crazy." "Crazy?" I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. "You think this is crazy?" "No, Camila. Crazy is sneaking around behind my back while I was out working to give us the life we have. Crazy is letting some random guy into our bed, the bed we've shared for 20 years. That's crazy." "Max, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake, okay? It didn't mean anything. I didn't want to hurt you. A mistake." I interrupted, laughing bitterly. "That's all it was to you? A mistake? Well, congratulations, Camila. You didn't just make a mistake. You destroyed everything. I hope it was worth it." She started crying harder, trying to say something, but I couldn't take it anymore. I hung up and tossed the phone onto the table. My chest was heaving, my pulse pounding in my ears. The waitress walked by, her eyes flicking to me with a mix of concern and curiosity. I waved her off, signaling for the check. I couldn't sit there any longer. I needed to get moving, to do something, anything. Before I lost my mind completely, after leaving the diner, I drove aimlessly again, the gold Mercedes humming beneath me like it was mocking the situation. The streets were empty, and the streetlights blurred in my vision as I tried to hold myself together. Her words kept replaying in my head. It didn't mean anything. That phrase bounced around in my skull like it was on loop. If it didn't mean anything, why did she do it? Why risk everything we had? Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot near a park where we used to bring the kids when they were little. The memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life now. I turned off the engine and sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Then my phone buzzed again. Another call from Camila. I ignored it. A moment later, it buzzed again, a text this time. Max, please come home. Let's talk about this. I need to explain. Explain what? That the man whose car I was now sitting in meant nothing to her? That she didn't want to hurt me? It was laughable, really. The audacity to ask me to come home, like she could patch this up with a few carefully chosen words. I unlocked the phone, tempted to throw it out the window but too curious about what would come next. I opened our security app instead, the one linked to the cameras around the house. The footage from earlier was still there, time-stamped and undeniable. The front door opening. The man stepping inside, his arm brushing hers. Their faces as they laughed at some private joke. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. And then, something clicked in my head. This wasn't the first time I'd seen him. About 3 months ago, I'd noticed a change in her. She started dressing up more, smiling less, and spending more time running errands. She was glued to her phone, texting late into the night but always quick to put it down when I walked into the room. I didn't question it then. I thought she was stressed or going through something, so I gave her space. But now, seeing him in my house, everything came flooding back. The excuses, the sudden girls' nights, the way she started picking small fights over nothing. I had ignored the signs because I trusted her. Because I believed we were stronger than this. The thought hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This had been going on for months, maybe longer. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as the pieces fell into place. My wife wasn't just unfaithful, she was living a double life right under my nose. And now, with her lover's car in my possession, I had the perfect way to make my next move. But first, I needed to figure out what that move would be. Sitting in that parking lot, I couldn't shake the image of the man's face. It was like a puzzle I didn't even know I was solving, and now the pieces were snapping into place. He wasn't just some stranger, I'd seen him before. I grabbed my phone and opened the security footage again, freezing it on his face. He looked younger than me, maybe mid-30s. Well-dressed. A little too confident, even on camera. My stomach churned as I realized I'd seen that smug grin at a company event. He was one of the vendors we worked with, a guy from a marketing firm Camila's company had partnered with last year. I remember her mentioning him once, some story about a funny guy who had everyone laughing during a meeting. Back then, I thought nothing of it. Now, I felt like an idiot for not seeing it. I scrolled through my emails, finding the one she'd sent me last year about the firm. Sure enough, there it was, the vendor's name and face, right there in black and white. Jeremy. The name felt heavy on my tongue, like saying it out loud might somehow make it more real. Jeremy, the guy who'd spent God knows how long cozying up to my wife, sitting at my dinner table during a work party, smiling like he didn't have a care in the world. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat and leaned back, closing my eyes. I could almost hear Camila's voice, sweet and convincing, telling me he was just a coworker. The lies were so seamless, I never even thought to question them. But now I had more than just a name. I had his car, his clothes, his keys. And with every passing second, I felt the anger bubbling under the surface, threatening to spill over. I wasn't the type to lash out, not usually. But this wasn't a usual situation. This was my wife, my marriage, my life, torn apart by some arrogant guy who thought he could walk into my house and take what wasn't his. I looked at the keys on the dashboard, the Mercedes emblem gleaming in the dim light. An idea started forming in the back of my mind. I didn't know exactly how I was going to handle this, but one thing was certain, Jeremy was going to regret ever stepping foot into my life. I started the car again, gripping the wheel tightly. It was time to figure out where he lived. Driving through the quiet streets, I replayed everything I knew about Jeremy. I didn't have much, but it was enough to get started. I remembered his name, his company, and the general area where their office was located, some fancy business district about 30 minutes from my house. I pulled into another empty parking lot and used my phone to look up the company. Within seconds, I found the office address, and with a little more digging, I found their team page. Sure enough, there he was, Jeremy Wilson, Marketing Director. His bio was annoyingly polished, boasting about his creative vision and ability to foster meaningful connections. Yeah, I bet. His LinkedIn page was even more revealing. It didn't just list his job, it also had his city and some photos from professional events. One of them was tagged, showing him at a cocktail party last month. I clicked through and found a comment from someone saying, "Hope you had a good time, Jeremy. Too bad I missed it. See you at the office next week." And there it was. The office location matched the city Camila had been visiting during her so-called work trips. The rage I felt earlier flared up again, but I tried to keep my head clear. I wasn't going to Jeremy's office. That would be stupid. I wasn't even sure what I'd do if I came face to face with him. No, this needed to be smarter. I switched gears and searched his name with the city he lived in, hoping for something to pop up. It didn't take long to find his address buried in some public records. I stared at it for a moment, feeling a mix of satisfaction and dread. It was a sleek condo complex on the edge of the city, the kind of place you'd expect a guy like him to live. Expensive but soulless. Just like him, I guessed. I saved the address and sat back in the car, my mind racing. I wasn't even sure what I planned to do. Confront him? Drop his car off on his doorstep with a note that said, "Stay out of my life"? Or something worse. The part of me that still cared about being rational screamed at me to let it go, to call a lawyer and start untangling this mess the right way. But the other part, the one that couldn't stop picturing him with Camila, kept pushing me forward. Before I could think too much about it, I started the car again and entered the address into my GPS. This wasn't about closure anymore. This was about taking control of something, anything, after watching my life fall apart. If Jeremy thought he could walk away from this unscathed, he was about to find out how wrong he was. The drive to Jeremy's condo felt like it lasted forever. The city lights blurred past as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind swinging between anger and cold, calculated determination. I rehearsed scenarios in my head, what I'd say if I saw him, what I'd do if he tried to brush me off like this was nothing. When I finally pulled into his complex, the place looked just as soulless as I'd imagined. The building was a towering glass and steel structure with a perfectly manicured front lawn and a concierge desk just inside the lobby. It screamed wealthy bachelor. I parked the Mercedes across the street, killing the engine and sitting there for a moment to steady myself. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. The kind that makes you feel like you're about to do something big, something you can't undo. The entrance to the condo building was quiet. No one was coming or going at this late hour, which made it easier to slip in unnoticed. I grabbed the spare key fob from the cup holder, Jeremy's key fob, and shoved it into my pocket. It felt like I was carrying a piece of him, a reminder of how much he'd invaded my life. I crossed the street and stepped into the lobby. A security guard sat behind the desk, flipping through a magazine, barely glancing up as I walked past. The fob beeped when I pressed it to the elevator panel, granting me access. My stomach twisted at the sound. The elevator ride up was suffocatingly silent. The numbers on the display blinked one by one until I reached the 17th floor. His door was easy to find. It had his name listed on the wall-mounted directory just outside. I stood there for a moment, staring at the polished wood, my hands clenched into fists. And then I heard voices. It wasn't coming from his condo, but from the hallway down the other side. A couple was arguing, something about rent, from the bits I could make out. It pulled me back to reality, made me realize just how insane this situation was. I was standing outside this man's door, in the middle of the night, with no real plan. I forced myself to step back, my pulse racing. But as I turned to leave, an idea hit me. I pulled the fob from my pocket and slipped it into the lockbox by the door. Then I crouched down and slid the Mercedes key under his welcome mat. If he thought he could waltz into my life and destroy it, I'd make sure he knew I wasn't going to just fade into the background. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for tonight, I was done. As I stepped back into the elevator, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. Jeremy would find his car tomorrow, right where it belonged. But he wouldn't find peace. Not with me watching his every move from now on. When I got back to my own car, I sat there for a long time, staring up at his building. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up feeling drained, like I'd spent all my energy just surviving the night. I hadn't gone home after leaving Jeremy's condo. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, a place where no one would think to find me. My phone was buzzing non-stop when I finally looked at it. Missed calls, texts, and even a couple of voicemails from Camila. I didn't have the strength to read or listen to them just yet. Instead, I scrolled through my work emails, trying to find some sense of normalcy. That's when I saw an email from HR. Jeremy Wilson, Incident Inquiry. My stomach dropped. I opened the email, and sure enough, it was a formal request for me to attend a meeting later that week. Apparently, Jeremy had already reached out to my company to report the theft of his car. The email didn't explicitly say it was about me, but I wasn't stupid. My name would come up. The whole thing made me laugh bitterly. He had the nerve to take my wife and then play the victim? I leaned back on the creaky motel bed, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just about the car now. Jeremy was trying to turn this into something bigger, something that could affect my career. And if Camila was involved in this somehow, it was only a matter of time before the personal bled into the professional. For a while, I just lay there, running through my options. I could go to the meeting and tell them everything, lay it all out on the table. But what would that accomplish? It wasn't like my bosses would care about my personal drama. They'd care about the car, the potential liability, and keeping the company's reputation intact. Then my phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was another text from Camila, and this time, I forced myself to read it. Max, I know you're angry, and I don't blame you. But we need to talk before this gets any worse. Please come home. I'm begging you. Something about the message felt off. It wasn't just guilt or desperation, it was fear. Like she knew something was coming that I didn't. I closed my eyes, my anger simmering just below the surface. I didn't know if I was ready to face her yet, but one thing was clear, this wasn't going to stay between the three of us. The fallout was starting, and I needed to decide whether I was going to play defense or go on the offensive. I sat in the motel room for a long time, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what my next move was. Camila's text kept replaying in my head. Before this gets any worse. Worse for who? Her? Jeremy? Me? My phone buzzed again, this time, an unknown number. I hesitated but answered anyway. Max, Camila's voice came through, shaky and breathless. Please, I need to talk to you. This is serious. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. I bet it is, I said flatly. What's wrong, Camila? Did your boyfriend wake up without his car? She ignored my jab. Listen, I don't have time to argue. Jeremy's saying you stole his car, and he's thinking about calling the police. I smirked, shaking my head. Funny. Did he mention why I had his car in the first place? Or does he leave that part out? Max, please, she pleaded. I swear I didn't know he was going to do this. You need to come home so we can fix this before it spirals out of control. I laughed coldly. Fix this? There's no fixing anything, Camila. You destroyed our marriage, and now your little fling is trying to ruin my life on top of it. She sniffled like she was about to cry. Maybe they were real tears, maybe not. I didn't care anymore. I made a mistake, okay? But you taking his car just made things worse. You gave him something to use against you. I gritted my teeth. So that's what this is about. Not guilt, not regret, damage control. She wasn't calling because she cared about how much she hurt me. She was calling because she didn't want Jeremy's mess blowing back on her. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. Tell me something, Camila. How long? She hesitated. Max. How long? Silence. Then, in the smallest voice, she whispered, 6 months. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the phone tighter. I'd already suspected it wasn't just a one-time thing, but hearing her admit it? It was like being kicked in the chest all over again. 6 months. That meant while I was out closing deals, bringing home bonuses, planning vacations for us, she was sneaking around behind my back. You're disgusting, I muttered. Max, I hung up. The moment I did, my hands started shaking. I'd kept it together on the call, but now I felt the weight of it all crashing down. The betrayal. The humiliation. The fact that she was only coming to me because she was afraid of what Jeremy might do, not because she was sorry. I took a deep breath, staring at my reflection in the dark TV screen. Camila was trying to cover herself. Jeremy was trying to cover himself. But me? I wasn't going to let them dictate how this played out. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play too. And I'd make sure neither of them walked away from this unscathed. After hanging up on Camila, I sat in silence, gripping my phone like it held all the answers. 6 months. Half a year of lying to my face, sneaking around, acting like nothing was wrong. And now that Jeremy was panicking, she had the nerve to call me, not to apologize, not to admit what she did, but to beg me to fix it before it got worse for her. I wasn't going to fix anything. I was going to finish it. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and left the motel. I had no idea where I was going, but sitting there, stewing in my anger, wasn't an option. I needed to act. First, I called a lawyer. It was early, but I left a voicemail explaining that I needed an urgent consultation about a divorce. Just saying the word divorce made my stomach tighten, but I pushed it down. Camila had already ended our marriage. I was just making it official. Next, I pulled into a quiet parking lot and started scrolling through my phone. I still had the pictures from last night, the ones I took of her and Jeremy in bed. I hadn't even looked at them since taking them, but now as I opened them, the fury came flooding back. I wasn't an idiot. I knew sending them out recklessly could backfire on me. But I needed leverage. If Jeremy wanted to drag me down, I wasn't going down alone. That's when I got another text. This one wasn't from Camila. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. Call me before this gets out of hand." I stared at the message, confused. Then another one came through. "This is Jeremy." I laughed, shaking my head. Of course. The coward was finally reaching out. I debated ignoring him, but my curiosity got the better of me. I hit call and put the phone to my ear. He picked up on the first ring. "Max," he said, his voice tight. "We need to be rational about this." I couldn't believe his audacity. Rational. I repeated. "You slept with my wife for 6 months, and now you want to be rational?" He sighed like he was the victim here. "Look, I get it. You're mad. But stealing my car, that crossed a line." I smirked. "Oh, that crossed a line? Not sneaking into my house? Not sleeping with my wife? The car was the big issue for you." "Max," he said sharply, his patience clearly thinning. "I could press charges. But I don't want to do that. I just want this to be over." I leaned back in my seat, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, how generous of you. Let me guess, you want me to keep quiet, let you walk away, and pretend this never happened." Silence. Then a quiet, "I think that's best for everyone." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This guy really thought I was going to roll over. That I'd let him and Camila get away with this without consequences. I smiled. "You know what, Jeremy? You're right. Let's settle this like rational men." He exhaled in relief. "Good. I knew you'd. But here's the thing," I cut him off. "I have pictures. Proof. And I'm guessing your company wouldn't like knowing their marketing director spends company hours sleeping with a married client." His breath caught. "You wouldn't." I chuckled. "Try me." Silence again. Longer this time. I could almost hear his brain scrambling for a way out. "What do you want?" he finally asked. I didn't answer right away. Because, truthfully, I wasn't sure yet. But I knew one thing, this wasn't ending the way he wanted. "Don't worry," I said finally. "You'll find out soon enough." Then I hung up, already feeling the shift in power. Camila and Jeremy thought they had control of this situation. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The moment I hung up on Jeremy, I knew he'd be scrambling. He wasn't the type to take real risks. He was a guy who thought he could manipulate situations to his advantage. But now, he knew I wasn't playing his game. I didn't have time to sit around waiting for his next move. I needed to strike first. Before I could do anything, my phone rang again. Camila. I debated ignoring it, but something in me wanted to hear just how deep she'd dig her own grave. I let it ring a few times before finally answering. "Max," she started, voice trembling. I just talked to Jeremy. He said you threatened him." I smirked. "Good." She let out a shaky breath. "What are you doing?" Why are you making this worse? I scoffed. You and Jeremy made this worse the moment you decided to lie for 6 months. Don't turn this around on me, Camila. She went quiet for a second. Then, like flipping a switch, her tone changed. Sweet. Careful. Max, I know you're hurting, and I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I rolled my eyes. Yeah? You accidentally slept with him for half a year. No, she said quickly. It wasn't like that. I was confused, I was lonely, Stop, I snapped. Don't give me excuses. Just admit it. You chose this. You knew exactly what you were doing. Her breathing was uneven now. Max, please. I don't want this to get ugly. I laughed. Ugly? Camila, it's already ugly. You just don't like that I'm the one holding the cards now. She hesitated. I want to fix this. That made me pause. Fix what, exactly? Our marriage, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A full bitter laugh that echoed in the car. She flinched. Max, I'm serious. I know I messed up, but we've been together for 20 years. I can't just throw that away. I shook my head, stunned at how fast she was trying to rewrite reality. She threw it away, but now that Jeremy was panicking, she wanted to crawl back? You already did, Camila, I said coldly. 6 months ago. She started crying. Theatrical. Maybe she thought I'd soften, like I always had before. But that man? The one who forgave her small lies, who ignored the red flags. He was dead the second I walked into that bedroom. I sighed. Listen to me carefully, Camila. We are done. There is no fixing this. I already contacted a lawyer, and I suggest you do the same. Her breath hitched. A lawyer? Yes. Panic crept into her voice. Max, wait. We don't have to do that. We can work through this. You're just emotional right now. I love you. That last part made my blood boil. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. You love me? I echoed, my voice sharp. Is that what you told Jeremy while you were screwing him in our bed? Silence. Then barely a whisper. It was never about love. I shut my eyes. There it is. The truth. I didn't even know why it still hurt. Maybe because deep down, I'd hoped she'd at least lie and say she loved me more. But she didn't. Because she didn't need to. She had already won, in her mind. She thought I'd break down, that I'd take her back, that I'd be the safe choice now that Jeremy wasn't looking so secure. But I wasn't playing the role she expected. I exhaled slowly. Good. Then it'll be easy for you to sign the divorce papers. Max, wait. I hung up. Then, I blocked her number. She wanted to play games. She wanted to lie, cheat, manipulate. Not anymore. The only thing left to do was make sure she and Jeremy both got exactly what they deserved. Blocking Camila felt like cutting off a dead limb. Painful, but necessary. For the first time in over 20 years, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not because things were okay, but because I finally saw her for who she really was. But I wasn't done yet. Jeremy wanted to protect his reputation. Camila wanted to sweep this under the rug. Neither of them would get what they wanted. I started with my boss. I set up a meeting and went in that afternoon, keeping my composure as I sat across from him in his office. You know why we're here, Max? He asked, folding his hands on the desk. I nodded. Jeremy Wilson. His brows furrowed slightly. He made a complaint this morning. Said you took his car. Said he was considering legal action. I let out a dry chuckle. Did he tell you why I had his car? My boss leaned back. No. But I had a feeling there was more to the story. I pulled out my phone, slid it across the desk, and let him see the pictures. Camila and Jeremy. In my bed. My boss's face went rigid. Jesus. I let the silence hang. Then I said, that's why I had his car. Because I came home early from a business trip and found him inside my house with my wife. He let out a long breath, rubbing his temple. And now he's trying to report you? I nodded. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I don't care if Jeremy keeps his job, but if he pushes this, I will take everything public. Including the fact that some of those business trips he was on, he was with her. And I have proof. My boss was silent for a moment, then he sighed. Jeremy's an idiot. I'll make sure this doesn't go anywhere. I nodded and stood up to leave. But before I walked out, my boss looked at me and said, "For what it's worth, Max, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this." I gave a small nod and left. One down. Next, I sent the pictures and a detailed email to Jeremy's company. No commentary, just the truth. His company had a strict ethics policy, and something told me they wouldn't like finding out their director was screwing around with a client's wife while on business trips. Then, just to make sure the truth really got out, I sent the pictures to a few mutual friends. I didn't say much, just, "Since Camila and Jeremy aren't brave enough to tell the truth, I'll do it for them." Then I turned my phone off. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know what fallout was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't my shame to carry anymore. I turned my phone back on after a few hours, and the explosion was instant. My inbox flooded. Missed calls, dozens. Texts, a mess of shock, support, and absolute chaos. Jeremy's company acted fast. Someone forwarded me an internal email. He'd been suspended pending an investigation. Apparently, a married man using company time and resources to have an affair with a client wasn't a great look for their brand. Camila? She was spiraling. The first message I saw from her wasn't even an apology. "How could you do this to me?" I laughed. I actually laughed. Do this to her? She destroyed our marriage. She humiliated me. But now that people knew, she was the victim? I scrolled past her other messages, some begging, some furious, all pathetic, until I saw one from a mutual friend. "Dude, Camila is losing it. She's telling people you're making this up, that the pictures are fake." Oh wow. So that was her angle? Deny, deny, deny? Did she think I was stupid? I had texts, timestamps, security footage, proof. I sent one text back. "Tell her I have more proof than I've even shared. If she wants to call me a liar, I'll release everything." Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. "Camila." I answered. Her voice was shaking. "Max, please. We don't have to do this." I was silent. She tried again. I messed up, okay? But you're blowing this out of proportion. Can we at least talk?" I smiled to myself. "Talk? Like how you talked to me while you were sneaking around with Jeremy." "Max, You called me a liar," I cut in. "That was a mistake." "I didn't mean it," she rushed. I was just scared. People are looking at me differently. My family is." I sighed. "Camila, I don't care." She made a small gasping sound, like she couldn't believe I didn't fall for her act. "You have to care. We've been together for 20 years. "No," I said simply. "We were together for 19 and a half. You threw the last 6 months away." Silence. Then quietly, "Are you really going through with the divorce?" "Yes." She sniffled. "And there's no way we can fix this?" I paused, just for a second. Let her hope. Let her think I might forgive her. Then I answered, voice cold and final. "No, Camila. We're done." I hung up, blocked her number again, and leaned back, exhaling. Camila was unraveling. Jeremy's career was tanking. And tomorrow? I'd make sure my divorce lawyer got the papers on her doorstep first thing in the morning. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. Not happy, not fixed, but like something heavy had finally been lifted off my chest. Camila and Jeremy spent months lying, sneaking, and playing their little game, thinking I'd never find out. Now, the game was over. I met with my lawyer at 9 a.m. sharp. I told him everything, about the affair, the evidence, the money I'd put into our home, everything. He nodded, took notes, and then slid a folder across the desk. "These are the initial divorce papers," he said. "Sign them, and we'll get them served to Camila today." I didn't hesitate. I signed. "Can we make it ugly for her?" I asked, my voice steady. He smirked. "I'll make sure she regrets ever betraying you." That was all I needed to hear. By noon, Camila was served at her office. I didn't get to see her reaction firsthand, but my phone, once again, blew up. Mutual friends texted me. "Dude." She had a full meltdown in the break room. She was crying, yelling at HR, saying you're ruining her life. Bro, I've never seen someone fall apart like this. She actually screamed at one of her coworkers who tried to comfort her. I let out a slow breath. It was happening. The consequences of her choices were finally hitting her. Then another message came in. This one from a number I didn't recognize. Max, it's Jeremy. I nearly laughed. What could this idiot possibly want now? I opened it. I lost my job today. I hope you're happy. I stared at the screen, then smirked. I typed back one word. Very. He didn't respond. I imagined him sitting in his overpriced condo, realizing he lost everything because he couldn't keep his hands off another man's wife. Camila, on the other hand, kept trying. By the evening, a new number was calling me. I ignored it. Then a text came through. Please, Max. Just talk to me. I didn't answer. Minutes later, another text. I don't know what to do. Everything is falling apart. Please, just let me explain. She still didn't get it. There was nothing left to explain. But she kept going. Can we meet? Just once? I just need to see you. I need to say everything to your face. For a second, I considered it. Then I realized, I didn't need to hear anything she had to say. I already knew the truth. So I typed my final message. You made your choices, Camila. Now live with them. And then for the last time, I blocked her. It's been a few months now. The divorce is in progress, but I've cut Camila out completely. No calls, no texts, no contact. She tried to reach out through friends at first, but even they got sick of her sob stories. Jeremy? He left town. His career is in shambles, and last I heard, he's trying to start fresh in another state. As for me, I'm healing. Slowly, but surely. Some days still hurt. 20 years of memories don't just disappear overnight. But I remind myself, the Camila I loved doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. People always ask if I regret exposing them, if I feel bad for ruining their lives. No. They ruined their own lives. I just made sure they couldn't pretend otherwise. And honestly, that's the closure I needed.